On this episode of Divine Truth Seekers, Adnan and Jameel are investigating a centuries-old myth surrounding one of the most revered figures in Islam, Muhammad. Peace be upon him.
Okay, Jameel, we have a good one today. According to the legend, Muhammad split the moon into two halves and then restored it.
But is it really possible? That's what we're here to find out.
With their usual skepticism and scientific approach, the Divine Truth Seekers set out to uncover the truth behind the myth.
We're gonna need to look at the moon's structure and composition to see if it's even possible to split it in half.
And we'll need to talk to experts in astronomy and physics to help us out.
The team sets up their equipment and begins their investigation, studying the moon's surface and structure with telescopes and other scientific instruments.
From what we can tell, the moon is solid and made up of rock and dust.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it can't be split in half.
The team decides to conduct a series of experiments to see if they can replicate the moon-splitting phenomenon. They try everything from using explosives to using powerful lasers to try and split the moon in half.
Okay, Jameel, we're locked onto the moon's surface. Let's give it a shot.
Alright, let's see if we can split this thing in half.
The Divine Truth Seekers activate their powerful Earth-based lasers, aiming them at the moon's surface in an attempt to split it in half.
I'm not seeing any results. Maybe we need to increase the power.
Be careful, Adnan. We don't want to damage the moon or cause any harm to anyone or anything.
I know. But if we don't test the limits, we'll never know what's possible.
The team increases the power of the lasers, directing them at the moon with even greater intensity. But still, there are no visible results.
It turns out that the moon is much denser and tougher than we initially thought. And I know what you're all thinking. Just turn up the power on the lasers even more, Adnan. But splitting it in half with lasers just isn't possible.
Agreed. But that doesn't mean the myth is completely debunked. Maybe there's another explanation for what Muhammad experienced.
The team then decide to consult with real-life NASA engineers to see once and for all if this out of this world legend is actually possible or not.
We've been studying the legend of Muhammad splitting the moon in half, and we're curious if it's possible for the moon to be split in half.
We've tried a few methods, including using lasers, but haven't had any success.
Well, the idea of the moon being split in half is purely fictional. There is no scientific evidence to suggest that it could be split in half, at least not without catastrophic consequences.
What about meteor impacts or other natural disasters? Could they potentially cause the moon to split?
While it's true that the moon has been impacted by meteors and other objects in the past, it's highly unlikely that such an event would cause the moon to split in half. The moon is made up of solid rock and is much tougher than most people realize.
So, if it's not possible for the moon to be split in half, what could the myth of Muhammad splitting the moon represent?
It's important to remember that myths often have symbolic meanings that go beyond their literal interpretations. It's possible that the story of Muhammad splitting the moon represents his divine power and authority.
That's an interesting perspective. It just goes to show that not all myths can be tested with science alone.
And that sometimes we need to consult with experts in other fields to gain a better understanding of the significance of these legends.
The team decides to consult with experts in Islamic history and theology to gain a better understanding of the context and symbolism behind the myth.
The splitting of the moon is considered one of the many miracles performed by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as a proof of his prophethood. The event is mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Qamar, where it says, "The hour has come near, and the moon has split in two."
It turns out that the myth may be more symbolic than literal. Muhammad was known for performing miraculous acts that were meant to demonstrate his power and authority.
So maybe the moon-splitting myth was meant to be a symbol of Muhammad's divinity and his ability to control the natural world.
The Divine Truth Seekers have once again shown that not all myths can be tested with science alone, but by approaching the myth from a different angle and seeking out experts in history and theology. They have gained a deeper understanding of its meaning and significance.
I guess some myths are meant to be understood on a symbolic level.
And maybe that's just as important as understanding them on a scientific level.
Join us next time on the Divine Truth Seekers, where we'll explore whether or not you can really make a car invisible by covering it with mirrors.